think we should go ahead and proceed. So why don't we go ahead and start with just a roll call attendance. So Michael, welcome.
Thank you. Mike Dick, I am present.
Great. Susan?
Susan Franklin, present.
Ralph?
Ralph Dormitzer, present.
Okay, and Brian Host, present. And so with that, why don't we go ahead and just dive straight into the topic at hand, which
Brian, excuse me.
Yeah.
I think we need to do a roll call as well.
Yes.
yeah, I truly apologize. Usually it's you guys presenting to us. Today you've got a full committee, so please.
Thank you. Carolyn,
Carolyn Coffey here.
thank you. Garrett,
Garrett Lubitz here.
Mark,
Mark Cameron here.
thank you. And Phil Lair here. Thank you. So we have a PowerPoint present. You want me to continue, Brian?
Please. And I hopefully, so Phil forwarded me the presentation a few hours ago. I forwarded it out to Capital Budget. Hopefully everyone has received it and maybe had a chance to review it. But please, Phil, and I think also it might be helpful just to give everyone on the Capital Budget Committee an update on where we are vis-a-vis other committees and process between now and Monday. Perhaps as either a backdrop or a postlude to the presentation itself.
Sure. We presented Tuesday night to what is tonight? Wednesday?
Tonight is Wednesday. It is.
Sorry. Last night we presented to the select board, and we did pretty much the same PowerPoint that we presented to you. We added a couple things, which were the floor plans, some floor layouts, just to remind us of some of the benefits of this design for you. So tonight we're meeting with you 5 to 6, and then 7 to 8 we are meeting with advisory. And then tomorrow evening, we have a public forum, which any and everybody is welcome, both in person and Zoom. That'll be a hybrid presentation. What did I miss, Carolyn? Anything? Okay, good. Hey.
I have a suggestion, Phil.
Sure.
Given the limited amount of time that we seem to have allowed here, I would ask you to skip over the floor plans unless others on the committee feel differently, and go straight to the capital budget concerns.
So just a quick question, Michael, when you refer to limited time, I mean, they've got advisory 7, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, do we have a time constraint other than 7 o'clock on this call? Does anyone have a time constraint?
We should have.
Well, I have until 7:30 anyway, but my concern is that we may have quite a few questions for Phil and Carolyn and Gert and Mark. And I think we should provide good chunk of time for those questions and their replies.
I don't think this will take more than 10 minutes, the presentation. That's okay.
Okay, it's your call.
Yeah, it's not a half-hour presentation. I don't like to talk that much, Mike.
Okay.
Let's see, would Michelle have that presentation to put up for us?
I do. Hang on one sec.
Yep, thank you.
Michelle, if I think we might have some of our consultants in the audience. I don't know if they could be promoted.
I didn't know if you wanted me to promote them now or after you gave your presentation. So
Either way,
get
whatever.
this
I just
up.
wanted to make sure that. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. No, I just wanted to make it aware that they were in there.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, some of this you've seen before. This is just the members of the Town Hall Building Committee, less one, Sam Wakeman, who passed away last year. Next slide. This is the charge. We've been over the charge a couple of times. We try to remember people exactly what we've been asked to do. Same functional, flexible, and accessible space. Remain at 41 Highland Ave. Respect to the 1857 structure in renovation and the upgrade, if you will, renovation of the auditorium so that it can be used for future generations. Next slide. This is a picture from the front, just showing the annex being removed and the new addition. That's fine. Yep. And it shows the ADA access by ramps with no railings. It's all done by grading so that we can not have the ugly railings that tend to be on the outside of the buildings that we have on two different locations, on the annex right now, and also a temporary one that's put in the front of the town hall for access. Next slide. This just is showing the floor plan, first floor plan of the new addition connected to the old town hall. We have highlighted a couple of things here. That in red here is the bathrooms that will be put in the front of the old town hall, in front of the auditorium, which is currently part of the vestibule. And they will be locked separately from the rest of the town hall so that they can be used as access bathrooms for any of the events that go on in the commons. That would eliminate having the 20 porta potties that we have to have there for the arts festival and I don't know, 5 or 6 that they put in, I think, for some of the farmers market and some of the other activities that go in there. Concession stand will be its existing space will be enlarged just a little bit, but it'll have access to the outside so a food truck can come in and have access to the back door without interfering with any of the entrances. This shows the general layout of the first floor of the new building. When you walk in the side entrance now, you look straight ahead to the old auditorium door, so it's very easy to see when you walk into the center location called the lobby of this addition. It'll be very easy to see where you go for the public access for different things like your clerk and building department and collectors. That's fine. This is just showing what you would see walking in the front door, looking down through to the old town hall entrance. The old doors would stay there, but you'd be able to, you don't have to go around the corners like it is set up now. Next. And this is just showing interior of the offices on one of the sides, the clerk and the collector. Highlighted area here just shows the necessary access with stairs to the second floor and the elevator and the one small meeting room on the first floor. Next, and this is a rendering of the staircase going up to the second floor, and behind that glass, straight in front of you, are the stairs going down to the basement. That has to be separated for fire reasons, for the fire code. The new structure will only have the vault and 2 columns supporting the floors. So future use, if anybody wanted to adjust any of the offices, larger or smaller, or remove, all of the walls that you see in there are partitions. They can be removed, they can be changed, and everything can be moved except for the vault and those 2 columns. That's what we were charged to do to make it flexible space. Excuse me. Second floor just shows the one small meeting and a medium meeting room next to the town manager's office. The offices on the second floor of Old Town Hall get redone, and then you have engineering and engineering offices across from the town manager's office. Mechanical storage, safe harbor are all on the first basement floor, excuse me, down below. Next, and here's your numbers. So that's the project budget at this time. Construction costs of $21.6 million. Construction contingency, just over 1 million. Soft costs, moving, et cetera, are 885,000. Owner's project manager is 832,000, designer 982,000, and soft cost contingencies of 405,000, brings a total of 25,800. Next. So this shows less appropriations to date. That's the 25,800 less 1.5 million and less the current CPC grant of 1 million, brings it to 23,303,738 probable funding needs. Yeah, those are your hard numbers. What's the last one, Michelle? Is there one more? This just is showing the benefits. We did run the numbers, best Vertex could do to give an idea of what it would cost to renovate both buildings as they stand. And we haven't given an estimate of $21 to $22 million to do all of that renovation. And the renovation would include new systems, new roof, restored auditorium, accessibility, updated bathrooms and finishes, repaired and remediated water damage, hopefully. That's some of the infiltration that comes around the windows and the flashing they're missing from the new 87 edition. The needs that are not met by the renovation would include a historic looking building on the common, public restrooms for community events, appropriate office space and meeting room space, and a contractually promised space for 143 TV and safe harbor. You lose the flexibility to change any of the layouts to accommodate future needs. And you lose the layout of wayfinding. When you go into the town hall now, it's very challenging to find where different offices are. The new layout, as we mentioned, you walk straight in, you can see where the offices are, and you look straight ahead, you can see the entrance to the old town hall. And we also lose the ability to have the catering kitchen for hopeful revenue generation. So one more. Town Hall Building Committee had a meeting on Monday night, and we had a unanimous vote in favor of moving forward with this project as it is proposed. So that includes restored auditorium for civic art use, public restrooms on the common, more attractive interior, keeping with historic common, a catering kitchen, updated HVAC, electrical, plumbing, fire safety systems, ADA compliance, adequate office space for employees with flexibility on floor plans, and meeting space for the dozens of committees that meet apparently 100 times annually as part of the town governance. That is what I have. I think that was about 11 minutes.
Okay. Let me just lead off with a general question. Your team had a meeting earlier this week, as you just mentioned, and took a vote to proceed. Can you give us a summary of sort of the key issues in your discussion and deliberation? I'm just very interested in understanding, what people weighed in terms of, your own committee's inventory of the pros and cons of continuing with this project at this time.
Sure. I think the committee felt very comfortable in the design, really liked what we produced out of the work that went into it. The thoroughness of the office space and the look of the exterior to satisfy, the historic value on the common. And certainly the functionality of it, the inside. Redoing the auditorium so it could be used and it's functional was something that we spent a lot of time on, trying to make it not glamorous but functional, so you didn't have to have permanent extension cords. And the public bathrooms were a huge asset to the design. And the catering kitchen, while that came a little later, seemed like an awful good idea to maybe use that hall in different ways other than just performances. everybody thinks the number stinks. I mean, that's pretty much a conclusion. But that's not something that we felt we had any control over. We did ask them to do some value engineering, which they did, which saved some money. But you're not going to knock $2 or $3 million off of this price with value engineering. But I think, as I said, it was unanimous. They really do want to move forward with this. And we're hoping we get support to move on this. That pretty much it, Brian.
Okay.
Brian, could I add one point in addition to what Phil just raised, which is that I think given where we are on the project right now, given what our initial charge was, we feel like we have basically taken this project to its completion. And at this point, we owe it to the citizens of Cohasset to let them see the work that's been done to date, and give them an opportunity to review the plans, review the costs, and decide whether or not it's a project that they support. Personally, I feel proud of the work that we've done. I think that we have done as much as we can to make this project as economically feasible as it can be. That said, if the town votes against the project, I will entirely understand and respect that decision, because that's where we are at this point. You know, I'm just one constituent among many, and even if I support this project, I respect that, you know, there are a lot of other voices that are out there, and everybody deserves to have their voice heard at this point in time, is my perspective.
And if I could just add to that as well, it's you know, it's certainly a number that like Garrett and Phil have said, none of us were pleased with. It wasn't the number we were expecting, and it wasn't the number that we were necessarily happy with. But nonetheless, it is the market's response to where we are currently economically. And just because we don't like it doesn't mean that we can say we don't like it and it's just going to change. I mean, we fundamentally provided a design based on what we were charged with, and anything less than that would be less than what we were charged. If we were to start pulling programming out of the building, it would be a less than optimally designed space. We would be designing a building that did not meet the current needs, never mind the future needs. So with all those things said, you know, it's unfortunate, but you know, we all wish it was going to be less, but nonetheless, it is what it is.
You know, recognizing that we uppercase W, everyone on this call and everybody that was at town meeting a year ago, you know, cast a vote one way or another with regards to, you know, proceeding to design docs and a bid, right? And at that time, this was a $16 million project. So how, and this question can either be for your committee or for your advisors who probably have closer insight into the answer to this question, but how do we get our heads around going from a $16 million project to a $25 million project, recognizing that if it had ever been presented as a $25 million project, I'm not sure we'd be here today or would have spent any time on this over the course of the past year.
Well, I think we started this process at a time when things were much more normal for our historical lifestyles, you know, and we had a significant disruption in the last couple of years, which economically turned a lot of things upside down. Beyond, you know, experiencing the most significant inflation and an escalation that we've ever experienced here.
So Mark, I agree with all those things. And I don't want this to turn into a monologue. I agree with all those things, but those things didn't appear a year ago. So a year ago at this time, we took this project to our voters as a $16 million project. and today it's a $25 million project, and nothing happened in the past 12 months in the macro environment that got us from a $16 million project to a $25 million project. So how?
Brian, I don't remember the numbers that way.
Okay.
I think we were at 18 to $19 million a year ago. We were up to
Okay.
22 in January, and then, you know, had this. But I think that 16 was back in like 20 pre-COVID, maybe when we got our first allocation. But the costs have been escalating consistently over the 4 years that we've been working on this.
Okay, I remember it differently. I'll go back and check my notes.
Yeah, and sorry, Brian, just adding on to what Carolyn said, not even taking the numbers into account, what the starting point was. But the numbers that we were working off of a year ago were not based off of numbers that had been put out to bid. They were numbers that were based off of estimates that had been prepared based off of similar projects that had occurred within the Massachusetts area. And those were then escalated with an assumed escalator. And I think that, you know, the assumed escalator probably was based off of older information. And then with the passage of time, we've seen these prices going up sort of across the board. You know, we're aware that, you know, our project may be a little bit higher per square foot than some other comparable projects in the region, but they're not wildly out of whack. And so what we're seeing is the marketplace. And I don't know whether those other, you know, projects had better estimates than we did. But I think what it was is, you know, part of what we're seeing is that our project had lots of stops and starts along the way. And so what we were frequently tasked with doing was taking sort of an older, out of date figure and then trying to update it. And rather than doing sort of the exercise of updating that number from top to bottom and looking at all the different components, there were assumed escalators that were used to basically take that price per square foot and bring it up. You know, I think that just based off of the information lags that were in there, the number wound up being less than probably it would have even cost a year ago if we had priced the project back then. That's my belief. And maybe Steve, maybe you would have some information that you could share to that. Steve's with Vertex.
Yeah, thank you, Garrett. I think sort of what's been said already to a degree is, you know, a year ago or more, we were working off of estimates. Some of the estimates were old, and we were escalating up because there was some design issues that were being worked through. Once we got the CM on board, that's when we were actually getting some of the prices. As was mentioned, we went out to bid for the the trade prices, which are your major subcontractors, your mechanical, electrical, plumbing, fire protection. Those are hard numbers. And the CM has been working on what's called the non-trade subcontractors and their numbers also. And we came up with a GMP, a guaranteed maximum price. This is all relatively recent, but these are much harder numbers now because they're coming from subcontractors, and those numbers are still being worked on. That's the number now. You know, there is some renegotiation that's continuing on with some of the non-trade subcontractors, and, you know, potentially bringing in another or other trade subcontractors, try and work that number down right up until town meeting. But, you know, what we have now is you know, essentially your worst case number. And we did find that, yeah, I think we didn't quite get as many bidders in some on some trades as we would, and it you know, I think part of it may have to do with location of project. There's work out there. Cohasset is somewhat off the beaten path to a degree, and, you know, we received less than we would hope for in some of the trade categories. And Jim, I don't know if you want to expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, the feedback we did get from the market is, location proved very tough here in a very hot market right now where the subcontractor market, trade partner market is able to kind of pick and choose, what jobs they are being such a hot market. This was a little bit less desirable of a project. I personally think it's a fantastic job. That's just the historic component of this. But the subcontractor market is reading this differently. I think we probably got about 2/3 of the participation on the trade side that we normally would see if you picked this job up and moved it to a different location. And it's really what the market is proving to be right now.
And a historic renovation is, we've got square foot costs that are comparable and recently bid that are less than this project, but they're all new construction. Some of them are, it's virgin property. It's clear the land and build the building. This is different. You've got a demolition of a building that's attached to a historic building. You got a historic renovation. You're working mechanical systems in between an existing building and a new building. So it sort of comes in at the top level of construction cost on a per square foot basis. But all the other, square foot costs across the board are up from where they were several years ago.
And just to,
But I don't want to dominate the conversation. Sorry, I just cut someone off.
no, I was just going to say, just keeping in mind too, I mean, we've all experienced that the Cohasset pricing factor with contractors, whether it be the geographical location itself, or just a zip code that we're tied to here. But it's real. I mean, in the bidding market, it's real. It's a hard place to get to. It's not easy. So regardless of what building capital investment we're making, it's a factor that has got to be, thought about. I mean, it's not something that has anything to do with necessarily our design, but driven by our location. So that's something that we can't change no matter what we do.
So I was just going to say, I've rattled off a string of questions. I definitely don't want to dominate this meeting.
Just as an aside, Brian, it's November 21 is the $16 million number. So
November.
year and a half.
21.
So not that long ago. You're right.
Okay. And I just don't remember that being updated prior to Fall Town. Well, okay. So that was, okay. Okay. I was just going to turn it over to other committee members. I'm sure others have questions. I don't want to run a monologue here. So why don't I pick you, Susan? Questions?
I mean, I think I have the same types of questions that everybody's asking. I don't know if there's a great explanation, but I do also have an observation. And I think it's very hard to find information about the history of this project, which we're talking about right now. I did spend time on that earlier today, trying to see if there was any information, a timeline of some of the numbers, and short of finding the warrants and for the special town meetings and the town meetings, you have to piece it all together. And I just think that's a little dangerous because people are going to have that question about how we got to where we are. So I think I've expressed this before, and that's, I don't know what is the plan for presenting information to the populace, but I think not presenting the whole story is going to be potentially detrimental to this project getting approved.
Susan, what full story are you?
Well, there's been so many numbers thrown around over the course of time. And I just think people, everybody in this meeting has been exposed to this information over a long period of time, and we're still struggling with figuring out exactly when we heard certain numbers. But people get a number in their head, and that's the only one they remember. And they're going to come back 2 years later and be like, whoa, wait a second, how did we go from, what was the first one, like 13 something, but there were a lot of soft costs that were included in the number, and now we're at 23. And these are the voters who are coming to vote. So I think it's important to explain how we got where we are. Some of it's improvements, some of it are things that, you know, we had estimates and maybe realized some other things that are more complex about renovating the old building, because way back when the renovation of the old building was thought to be something like 4 million of the number, I believe. And now we're saying that that's a big piece of the price problem. I'm just expressing what I know is going to happen when because people don't come to these meetings, people don't read the materials, they just react to the one piece of information that they still have on their brain.
It's a great point. Thank you.
Yep.
For what it's worth, and this may be completely inaccurate, seizing on Susan's point and the numbers that stick in people's heads, what stuck in my head, having tracked this fairly closely, was, you know, it was a $16 million number when we sort of landed on this design. And that being the number, you know, when the decision was made to, you know, to fund the design and bid docs. May or may not be accurate, but that's, again, just, you know, seizing on the idea that things stick in people's mind. And that number, as I recall, it went to 20 last August. And then it went to 23 or ish somewhere around January. And, you know, now it's at 25 today. So again, none of that may be accurate, right? I'm just sort of sharing what I think that people who have watched this at least have the potential to have set up in their head coming into town meeting next week. And so it's, you know, it's at least based on the numbers in my head, it's a very big jump. I just share that not to say that those were the numbers. I share that to just sort of give the example of, I think, the issue that you're going to face on Monday. Susan, thanks for the observation. Any other questions or?
No, I don't have any specific questions about the project. And that's all been very clear.
Okay.
I just, not to beat a dead horse, but when we look at the materials that are available to the townspeople, it feels a little bit like a polished marketing spin and not really telling the story of like the cost and what it means. And I'm sure that'll come out in town meeting, I hope. But it just seems like it's been cleansed, I guess, is what I'm saying.
That's important. Thank you.
Mike?
Thank you for that observation. I don't think that was something that was certainly not our intent to cleanse the numbers and to hide the fact that this project has escalated over time. I think we're just also close to it, and you know, frankly, sharing some of the frustrations along the way with the fact that, you know, we see these numbers going up, and you know, every time we get a new set of numbers, sort of cringe before opening the document and seeing what they're going to do. So, yeah,
right. Michael, do you want to go next? You're on mute. Mike, you're on mute.
So sorry. I have quite a few questions, but let me make an observation that Capital Budget Committee generally spends several meetings on a project of this size and scope with the proponents, being able to ask quite a few questions and going down into detail to understand, are we getting the value for our money? Is it worth it? And at this point, I just have a hard time with how this project has been presented to capital budget, and advisory can make their own statement on it. But we've got a lot of questions, and we also strictly on the project itself. And then we have a lot of questions on financing, how to fund this, and the effect it will have on the 10-year plan. And so, I mean, we've got 22 minutes left for a $25.8 million project. I feel that's really unfair to capital budget. I also would make the observation that the select boards, plural, going back to 2014 up to the present day, have not shown strong leadership in watching out for the cost. So in an odd way, I actually congratulate this group for trying their very best and coming up with great ideas, but that the cost just went way off the rails. And someone should have called halt to say, whoa, 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 wait a minute. If we keep going, this is going to wind up costing a whole lot more than we originally thought. But that did not happen. And your charge was not to watch the cost. And so I feel that it is the select boards, plural, that should have been. And I wish we had more time with the select board and with the town manager and the town finance director to go through the financing. In my gut feel, I feel this is way too expensive for the town. Especially that knowing that we've got other competing interests who are not shovel ready as you are, who will be coming to us as well. And boy, I really fear that for future projects, not town hall, but other projects, fields and courts and schools and so forth, that we're going to hear, oh, well, contractors, subcontractors are putting a Cohasset premium on it. And if that's really truly the case, then we should be designing projects that help us deal with that premium that this town has to pay. So I can give you all my questions, but basically I just, jumped to my conclusion at this time. And I'm more than willing to have questions answered and for us to do our deep dive. But here again, we're at the 11th hour. Our town meeting is on Monday. And we really don't have the time to do a careful review of this. So, Brian, I'm sort of, I want to be helpful, and you could probably say, Mike, you're not being helpful, but I really want to be helpful and do the right thing. I want to come to the right decision. And at this point, it just feels way off the rails. And the other point I would like to make, the other observation I would like to make is, has this method of owners, project manager, and consultants doing design drawings, has this been a good process for us? We spent, it was about 1.2 or 1.4 million. And correct me if I'm wrong on that number, but that's what's in my head. Has that been of value to the town? Because we've now wound up at 25.8 million all in, and a funding need of 23.3. So maybe it's best that we offer our observations at this point rather than asking specific questions, because I don't think there's time to have our questions answered. I mean, I asked the other committee members, and we haven't heard yet from Ralph, who is the one person I often look to for his wisdom and his experience over years. He's shaking his head. No, I ain't that smart. But I'd like to hear more observations, perhaps. Thoughts?
Ralph, questions, observations, plead the fifth.
I thank you very much for the compliment. I wish it were deserved. Oh gosh, this is very difficult in many ways. If I were a member of your committee, that is the Town Hall Building Committee, I'd feel as you do. I know, having been involved in a lot of projects, when you put your heart into it and then it goes wrong for whatever reasons, is extremely discouraging. I fully understand that. I even know that both Mark and Carolyn spent time with me and tried to satisfy some objectives I had in the design, and I appreciate that too. I guess you probably read, or maybe you didn't read what I said in a Facebook post, and what I pointed out, and it's even more true today, is that if you had 25 million to spend, what would you spend it on? Would you spend it on this? Or, as you know, I felt the Oaks was an enormous opportunity. And the benefit that you get, if you talk about cost benefit, of getting the Oaks is incomparable with, that is positively incomparable with actually doing this project. So I look at cost benefit, and I understand the cost benefit of having a more functional town hall, one that might actually attract additional things beyond just the Cohasset Playhouse and also voting. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, but it doesn't compare really with the other. So I guess also the other thing that I felt was important to observe was with what you all have observed. You actually even had a negative on the fifth point of what the charge was originally to the committee. And of course, that was one where we would fit within the 10-year capital plan. And then the assumption was that the town could afford to pay for it out of operating capital or operating income. That was put there, I think, largely because we actually failed to pass the original first design, although there may have been other reasons why people didn't vote for the first design, but it was there because it was generally understood that people really did not want to have an override, whether it's called excluded debt or override. People really don't want to do that for this purpose. And as I think Michael has also said, I think that there are at least one other really very major project likely to happen, which is some renovation of the middle high school. And I think that's almost inevitable, however much that's going to cost us. And we're getting a tremendous amount of pressure on fields and courts in the $4 million range also. So we have a whole series of things. And in addition to which, of course, the fire and police department want to do something as well. Anyway, if people really understood the scale of all of this, they would say we're going to have to do something to scale back on our thoughts. And the last thing I'll tell you a little bit about how I think about how projects should go forward. And I again recognize Michael's point on this, and that is, in a way, I don't want to hand off a project to someone who we pay to give us a design. I think it's almost, and this is maybe very old-fashioned, but the way good designs or good thoughts come out is usually people sit down with a pencil and paper, and there are 3 or 4 people sitting around the table trying to sketch out ideas, and do not hand anything off until those sketches are at least conceptually where they need to be. And I can tell you that's happened recently on Elm Street, where I'm involved. We're or just citizens are able to actually solve problems which are in fact seem insoluble when we hand them off to third parties. And so I do think there is a whole process question about what happens here. And quite frankly, the charge that's given to the committee puts you in that is the town hall building committee, puts you in an awful bind. I really think it does. And that it asks you to do something which in fact inevitably will be very expensive. And I see that, I've read that charge and I've seen it many, many times. And they're asking you to put together what you have put together. So you've done exactly what the charge asked you to do, with one exception. It didn't meet the financial provision, which actually was number 5. That's what it was.
Right.
So I guess the only, and you know how I'm thinking, I think this is going to be very difficult for you all. And I know it's difficult already for you. So I'm sympathetic with where you are. I wouldn't want to be in the position you're in right now. I do think, however, you'll need to be very candid about what, in fact, the implication is on the tax rate. People are going to want to know that. They're going to know not only what this is going to cost us for the $22 million, if hopefully we get down as low as that, but they're going to ask you, what is this interest rate going to do to us at this time? It's a very poor time to actually have to bond this thing. So, the actual cost of this is going to be quite substantial. And I think others will ask, what do we expect to have coming forward with respect to the middle high school? What's going to be coming forward with respect to at least perhaps the police department, maybe not the fire department? And what's going to happen with respect to the fields? And numbers like 10% of the assessed value of the town might be talking about here. So they're huge numbers. And somehow or other, all of this has to be put together. And I know that initially the select board were going to do this, try to put it all together in a single package. And I still think it needs some kind of consideration so people know what the total bill is going to be as best one can come up with it, and constrain all projects to certain numbers to fit whatever the acceptable number is in terms of a total excluded debt override, which in my view could be as much as 7 to 10%. That's what it looks like to me. So I ask you, what do you think? Do you think this is going to exclude debt? I guess that's the only question I can ask. So I'm sorry to hold forth this way. I've had an awful lot of thinking about what would I do differently if I were in your spot. I don't really know what to do. So anyway, thank you for listening to me.
I don't know if there are any questions or reactions from the building committee or any of the advisors. But...
Mark and I both have our hands up. His hand was up first.
Okay, please, Mark, go ahead. Michelle,
So yeah, sorry, I was just trying to find the unmute button. So just in terms of, Mike's comments on the deep dive, I mean, we did extensive deep dives here. I feel that, and we did invite capital into these conversations and looking at ways to reduce the size of the building, populate the lower level in the basement, doing value engineering exercises with such as that. Not to mention the months that we spent looking at geothermal. So I don't really feel from my purview that it's really accurate to say that we didn't involve capital budget. I think we did. And certainly our meetings were all open, and anytime capital budget or any member of capital budget wanted to attend, they were more than welcome to. So, and we welcome that collaborative feedback. In terms of Ralph's comments on the Oaks, there's certainly really rehabilitation costs there, and accommodating that to be a town hall offices with appropriate access in terms of elevator, and using that space as converting it from a residential use to a commercial use. With all that though, even if all that gets figured out and coming off the tax roll and being on the tax roll, it's still the question that lingers is, well, what does the town do with a capital asset that they have at 41 Highland Ave? Because it's still a cohasset asset that is deteriorating. And at some point, it's either going to fall down, burn down, or just be completely inhabitable. And so if we don't address our assets, then we're just kicking the can down the road and letting the problem surface somewhere else at some other time. In terms of the timing, yes, the timing of this is unfortunate in terms of the interest rates. It certainly is. And, you know, it was untimely for COVID to happen. And we paused because we didn't know what was going to happen with COVID and where everything in the world was going to go and all of the uncertainty that was there. And we paused and we stopped, and we don't have a crystal ball to predict where the next set of months and years are going to take us. You know, the fact that this is a public project, we are very constrained in terms of when we can ask for money. We don't have the freedom as if this was a private endeavor, and we are relying on the fact that we have to go to town meeting, we have to go to the ballot votes, we have to factor all of those equations into our timing as a project, which is very cumbersome and very difficult, especially when you hear that no one wants to have a special town meeting to talk about this, that this topic should only be reserved for annual town meeting. So again, with all that said, you know, as unfavorable as the number is, if we don't do this, then what? You know, this is the fourth attempt at this, and is clearly a problem that the town has to address that has not been addressed. So if we don't do this, then what do we do?
And which is about what I was going to say as well, just to add to it. There has to be some investment in this building. And if we're going to make a significant investment in the building, then we would argue that let's do it in the way that at least meets the needs of the town, that doesn't renovate a building that has 5 people sharing what should be a meeting room as their office space, and that, you know, gives the town the structure that it needs and the asset, the auditorium and the public restrooms and that sort of thing. We've already spent, as you pointed out, Mike, you know, well over $1 million in planning for this. And if we don't do this project, it's just going to require more money to be spent with nothing to show for it, more planning. And we'll get to the point where things will start breaking down that have to be fixed. And the town will come running to you guys saying, you know, you've got to put this project aside and put in a new HVAC so that we can be in the build. You know, things are just going to start giving the way the elevator did. And it's going to put pressure on the operating budget. So, you know, like you say, we're not happy with the way this came out either, but we still feel like we've got to make an investment. And if we're going to make an investment, we have a shovel-ready project, and it's a good plan that meets the needs of the town.
Okay. Circling back, I having reflected on what I've heard from my colleagues on Capitol, I think it's fair to say that there are a lot of voices articulating praise for what you've done as a committee here. And just individually, I'd like to say that this is, you know, having been around this town hall discussion for, I don't know, 10 or 12 years now, this is the first design that at least I individually could envision being on that site 100 years from now, where people will walk by it and still feel proud of it and feel like it is, you know, feel like it is a timeless design. I did not feel that way about the past 2 designs. So in that context, you know, it at least allows me to take somewhat of a more constructive long-term view relative to the sticker shock, but that does not change the fact that I'm suffering, you know, sort of a cerebral meltdown over this price. So I just want to circle back and understand this a little bit more. I certainly understand that you know, we were in a wildly hot construction market pre-COVID. And I certainly understand that, you know, there was a bunch of supply chain craziness that took place during COVID that, you know, frankly produced another peak on top of a pre-existing peak. I guess the question that I'm struggling with a little bit is the idea that we're in a hot market today. And I just want to probe this for a second, but everything that I read is that commercial construction is slowing. And just from the discussions around the school projects, in a very direct conversation with the MSBA, who is, frankly, the largest consumer of public construction projects in the state by an order of magnitude, they put their accelerated repair program on hold because they, were not getting what they believed to be was fair or attractive pricing for any of the projects that were coming back from bid, which is a very clear sign of demand destruction based on excessive price. So there's an old saying, the cure for high price is high price, because people stop buying and then the price comes down. And, I think most people on this phone have been around long enough to have been through several construction market cycles. And, when people suddenly find themselves not busy, their posture changes in terms of their bids. So I guess my question is, are we really in a hot market right now? And if so, at what phase are we in terms of seeing that unravel? Because it's quite clearly not sustainable.
I wonder, do prevailing wages come down? I guess this is a question really yours and mine for Steve and Jim.
Yeah, or inversely, did prevailing wages even go up? I mean, one of the things I'm struggling with here is, like, I look at this $25.8 million price buildup, right? The OPM number didn't go up. The design number didn't go up. The construction number went up. And, the price of lumber, went to $1,600 per board foot. It's back down in the 400s now. Right? I mean, I don't watch it daily, but that was the last time I saw it. It's almost pre-COVID. A huge chunk of this is labor, which is, at least as I understand it, is prevailing wage, which I'm not even aware that it ever moved. So, the only other component in this is somebody's profit. And I just have this gnawing feeling that, with the exception of a handful of things in the supply chain, HVAC in particular, but there are probably some other items that may in fact be scarce and see, kind of usurious pricing at the moment. It just doesn't make sense to me that these prices are on this much of a fast track in one direction. So I just put a lot out there. I understand the bids are what the bids are, but it just doesn't make any sense to me, given that some of these materials have already round tripped. The labor never should have round tripped. And that's the majority of the project. So what is it that's driving these bids? Is it just, people don't like the deal, so they're bidding a hugely profitable contract? It's a rhetorical question. I don't want to say anymore, but I'll turn it over to Steve, Jim. I mean, what is really happening here?
Well, just to touch on a couple of your points, Brian, the OPM and the designer, we've had contracts for quite a while now.
Yeah.
We've had rates, we've held the rates. That's why you're really not seeing any movement in our fees or our budget and JRA's fee. Prevailing wage never goes down. It only goes up or stays the same. And each prevailing wage rate comes out is particular to the job. We have to request it from the state. Some trades go up, some trades don't. Generally, there's there'll be a series of dates that will show increases, but prevailing wage never goes down. One other thing that we can probably point out is that once we had Commodore on board, we did a fair amount of additional investigation into the building, again in particular with the old town hall, because the annex, the addition was coming down, and other items were found, in particular some structural issues in and around the auditorium stage and elevator section that did increase some costs there that we were not aware of previously. So there's a couple factors there. Jim, I don't know if you want to add anything more to, to some of the items we've encountered and or some, labor rates and labor cost issues.
Sure, Steve. Yeah, I mean, Brian, so our market's still, the construction market is still absolutely booming right now. And the subcontractor market does have control of that. They are able to drive the prices. This is obviously what the market tells us, right? With the trade contractors, which Steve had spoke about earlier, really we're just following the state procurement laws, right? We're driven through that process compared to the non-trade subcontractors where we can bring in. We have those ones we have the bigger relationships with. We can do the negotiations with. That's where we're able to help with the pricing. On the trade side, we're really just following the state procurement laws. We are seeing in the construction market, the life sciences division has heavily gone down. The commercial development has considerably gone on pause. But what we're seeing is a huge uptick in public and a huge uptick in the private academic market. They tend to come in ebbs and flows like that. When one goes down, the other one goes up. So we're still anticipating at least another couple of years of a hot market. We're starting to see some slowdown on the consultant side in certain areas, and that's usually an indicator, as you can imagine, right? Going through this process, taking a few years to get through it. As the consultant market starts to slow down, we see that construction trend a few years later, 18 to 24 months. So right now it's still an extremely hot market, particularly with the public side. And to Steve's point with the exploratory that we did, when we got on board, we had quickly gotten in there and really done a deep dive into all the exposure that could potentially come out, throughout the process of construction. And that's part of the construction manager risk process, is kind of peeling back that onion, trying to get everything into a set of documents, be able to really understand what it's going to take to build that building and take all the risk off the table. As a construction manager at risk, we're taking all that risk off of the table, where if you went design, bid, build, got in there later and opened all this up, this is change order. So there was, there was a lot of, not a lot, but there was a considerable amount of structural work that we needed to work through in their damage to the existing structure that we had to get incorporated into the design documents, incorporate some of the design around the foundation system that's existing there. When we dug down, the foundation system, the old town hall, particularly where a button to it had its challenges, and we found a considerable amount of rot, if you will, in the framing of the basement level there. So a lot of that got incorporated in very late into the design, not by anybody's fault. This team did a fantastic job prior to us coming on board, but this is where we really come in and start to dig in as professionals and bring that value, if that makes sense.
Brian, I feel that we need to do our due diligence on the funding. I don't know how we can proceed. I'm not sure if Michelle Leary can speak for our finance director, but she should be in this meeting with us, given the seriousness of this project and how much is at stake.
She had a death in the family. She was out today.
I see. I'm sorry to hear that. At this point, Michelle, I don't think this project is ready for town meeting without a full understanding of the financing.
So, Michael,
that's my observation.
Give her the opportunity to answer. Michelle, do you have the ability to walk us through the financial numbers on this?
And Michelle,
hey,
I
Brian.
sent off a several questions.
It's Justin. Michelle had to step out for a minute or two, but she should be back on.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry to interrupt.
There's two people with hands up.
Yep. Well, I see one.
I think, I don't know if Mark means to have his up. It's been up all along.
Yeah.
Since he spoke before.
Justin excuse me, Brian, is David Farag in the audience with a hand up?
I believe so. Stand by 1 second and I will try my best to promote him. I'm just on my cell phone, so give me about 15 seconds.
Okay.
Is that okay with you, Brian?
Yeah, absolutely. And looks like Mark took his hand down in the interim.
And I did have conversations with Jen.
Okay.
So I might be able to give some information, but I'm not sure how helpful that would be.
Any information is better than none.
That
David, it's been
said,
promoted.
I think we need to have the official
I agree.
explanation.
I completely agree with you, Michael, but I mean, we need to hear it from someone other than Carolyn, but if Carolyn can share it, we can at least begin to process it.
Mhm.
No offense, Carolyn. I don't think you want
No,
to
no problem. I didn't, do you want me to talk now or David?
I've been promoted, yeah.
Okay, let's go with David. We'll come back to Carolyn with an answer to Mike's question.
Thank you.
Thank you
Michelle
for,
may be back by then. You may be off the hot seat, Carolyn.
I'll fill in until she gets back, but thank you so much for bringing me in here. I'm here as a citizen, David Farag, 39 Beechwood Street. I was on the first two committees in 08 and 14 regarding the feasibility study for the original town hall and then looking at the annex as well in 2014. And I've followed this process in 2018, and then of course with the current group. Just quickly, I would say a couple quick points. I think going forward on any project, whether it's the town hall, the school, the fields, or whatever, we've got to understand that all of those give estimates, and that this one actually has bids out there in the market, and they explain sort of what's potentially going on in the market today, which may change or not as time goes on. But I think it's something that Cohasset and all the boards are going to have to wrap around as to what we're going to get when we do go out to bid for certain things. Now with this one, it's my understanding that there was 60 sub bids, because you're dealing with everything from the the drywall to the electricians, things like that, which you won't have on a field, but you are going to have with any building that gets redone or gets built from scratch. So I think it's something to look at going forward. Now, with the bids that there are, it's my understanding that, those bids are only good for 30 to 60 days. So when you do go to bid, that's as far as they can generally stretch them out. So the public process, the town is not going to have 3 months or 6 months to chew on what happens when they get the bids. They're going to have a minimum or maximum 1 month or maybe 2 tops to then act on those bids. Another quick point is that coming up this summer, the stretch code regarding the building code is coming into play July 1st, which has to deal with the energy code and the upping of that for any construction or reconstruction of a building. So any building in the town going forward, whether it's reconstructed or constructed, is going to have to meet that energy code, which of course is going to add costs post July 1st, 2023. So there's a lot of factors that are going to go into not only this project, but any other project that's going to come across the board. And then finally with this, if I can understand the cost, that there's a concern regarding the cost and how we got there or how they got there. But the issue that the town's going to have is, well, if you don't go forward in some way, shape, or form, it doesn't get rid of the problems that are there at the town hall. And really, between both the annex and the old town hall, the working conditions, the bathrooms, the elevator is already out. All of the tech that there is, both buildings were constructed before the internet, before the computer, and before the American with Disabilities Act. So anything that was done to try and deal with those was gerrymandered and Mickey Moused in order to do that. And you can see that all over the building. In the second floor of the old town hall, you can see that we have an air conditioner that runs almost 24/7 just to keep the wiring cool for all the IT that goes through the building so that it doesn't have a meltdown. So that is not going to go away whether or not the project goes forward. So with that being said, the town hall needs to be, reconstructed and refreshed. It's not a want or a need. At this point, it's a necessity. And it's going to be, I know it's a tough road to hoe, but we're going to, as a town, going to have to figure out how we're going to pay for that. And the other needs in the town this project is only bumping into those needs because the town has kicked the can down the road for 15 years on this town hall project. And I would bid to you that the town has not saved anything by kicking this can down the road, that this project has only become more costly by doing so. And that is not necessarily the prudent way to go about things, and that we've been penny wise and pound foolish in dealing with the town hall for all of these years. And now we're coming up to the the issues that we have in front of you. So I hope you support the project and look to redo the town hall, because it is a necessity for the nervous system of the town. And I just thank you for the time to comment as a citizen. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Thanks, David.
Do we have Michelle Leary back at this time? We do. Michelle.
Yes.
So
We are still waiting on her. She should be back in about 2 minutes.
I know I'm here.
No,
I'm here.
we've got her.
Oh,
Your
she is
ears-
there. Oh, wonderful.
Not
Michelle,
sure if
take
your ears
it
were
away.
ringing, but there's a question specifically with regards to the financing. Now, I know that Jen's out today, but I also know this was discussed last night, and we are wondering if you were in a position to discuss the financing specifics and implications.
To be honest, I would rather that come from Jennifer. I can take a stab at any questions you may have. But it really should come from the finance director.
It should. Okay. I'm literally just sitting here processing. Let me suggest this. We do need to hear it from the finance director. It would be helpful, I think, at this moment in time, either you or Caroline, whoever.
Brian, you're cutting in and out.
Yeah, you're.
I think that it would be helpful for anyone that was at the select board meeting last night and heard this discussion, if they could provide a summary of it at the moment, that would be helpful. We clearly need to hear it from Jen or from Chris, but ideally from Jen, which isn't happening tonight. So Michelle, Carolyn, would either one of you feel comfortable summarizing what you heard at the select board meeting?
I don't remember the select board really talking about the specifics of the financing, other than
Okay.
keying into the need being the 23.3 million and how that fit
Okay.
into the overall picture of the needs of the town. Saying some of the same things that you all have brought up with the fact that the town hasn't had major investments in the infrastructure in many years, and they're coming due. Did you want to say something, Michelle? I see your hand.
I just wanted to say that we do have a select board member in the audience, and I'd like to promote Corey
Two.
Evans. He has his hand raised, and
Sure.
yes, we have two, but Corey would like to speak on this.
Okay.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Hi, Corey. Yes, we can.
Yes.
Brian, we ran into the same kind of struggle without the town finance director. Carolyn's summary is correct. We do have the spreadsheet, which was provided by the finance director a few weeks ago regarding the impact of a $21 million exclusion. I think that was the number. And then so we just, the only discussion we had was that if the number was a little bit higher, that number would go up slightly from that spreadsheet, which we had been presented to 3 or 4 weeks back. I think that probably made it to your inbox. So that's still the most updated information that we were provided as well, as far as I know.
Okay. I don't know exactly what people were referencing, but there was a spreadsheet that was, okay, so look, let's be in agreement. We have to hear this from our finance director, okay? So what I'm about to say does not in any way preempt or obviate that need. But just so that people can start thinking about this, there was a sort of a debt exclusion spreadsheet that was circulated a couple of weeks ago. I don't have it in front of me, but my notes, which may or may not be accurate, okay, stated that a $21 million exclusion generated $1.5 million per year in annual debt service, which was somewhere around $400 extra or to the average, or sorry, the median, not the mean, but the median household.
That's correct.
So that's kind of what I was working with, and just pushing those numbers around, interpolating, which is not scientific, because it's not the way that's not the way debt service works. But just pushing this around, if the numbers, I was just playing with this number, and at 23.3 instead of 21, you're looking at, something closer to 1.7 million per year, and probably something closer to, $450, $460 per median household. And just to be clear, the median household valuation is 995,000. And the median, and the current tax on a median household is, I think, 11,800. So, this is kind of just below a 4% impact on, on a median household. All
Right.
held equal, right?
Yeah, remember too that the Osgood debt will, which is
Yeah.
$220, would be rolling off. So
It will, and that's kind of why I emphasized all other things held equal.
Yeah.
The issue there, and this gets back to context, is that that money is fundamentally already spent. There's no way that Town Hall Building Committee would understand that, but there has been a series of conversations about the fact that our road program needs an incremental between $500,000 and $800,000 a year, which will almost certainly not be squeezed out of the operating budgets and will come to the taxpayers in the form of an incremental tax increase, and that will happen in the next 12 months. And that that will be roughly that $200 per household that's rolling off.
So just one, Jen, I hesitate to say, but in my conversation with her, as I understand it, the project would be funded with short-term debt until its completion, at which time the bonds would be issued, which is likely fiscal 26. So the first actual debt payment, debt service payment, would be fiscal 27, and she would structure it in a way that there would be equal principal payments over the life of the bond, and therefore the interest payments would be decreasing over the life of the bond as it gets paid back. So that year one debt service payment would be the largest tax impact, and that they would decline over time.
Yeah. We
just want to be clear about that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. What's not clear is whether that spreadsheet that you provided us was year one, or whether that was sort of a mortgage payment structure, which is, level principal and interest payments.
No, it was year one.
I'm sorry for speaking out of turn, Mr. Host.
No, please, Corey, your hands up.
Yeah, no,
please.
Yeah, no. So I have I do have the spreadsheet that the finance director provided us, and it does list the decreasing debt payments. So yeah, the existing payment, this is on a $20 million bond, FY 27, where it's the first year. I guess this was 26, is the 1.5 million, but then it does decrease. So like let's go 10 years at FY 37, it's a $1.1 million impact. So then the impact per household does go down the way that Jennifer has structured the financing for this. I can send this around to everybody right now if that's helpful. That way you can share it, Brian, or unless you don't.
Yeah,
want
I mean,
to
it's helpful for people to have. It's not necessarily helpful to try and digest this and reconcile it in the moment.
I agree.
I assume what you're sending, Corey, is a $21 million debt exclusion. Is that correct?
This one is for 20, but yeah, I mean, it's the mechanism for that. Yeah,
it's the mechanism. It gives people an understanding of where this number is going to fall out, which is 25% higher.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Roughly
Brian,
speaking.
I also have a schedule, but actually it's based on the 23.3, so I can share that as well.
Me too.
That's a better one. Yeah. Oh, you've got that? Oh, my apologies for having all day.
Okay, we don't. That's the one that would be most helpful. And can you either screen share it or either summarize it for us, Michelle?
Brian, before we move into this,
Yep.
there are other factors that go into this forecast for the impact to the town.
Agreed. Let's just digest the data that we have.
So I want to
let's go to-
caution anyone who's following this that this is not the complete picture and should not be taken as, oh, well, it'll not take it for whatever conclusions you might draw from it, that there's more factors. We have sent over multiple times questions to Jen Mullen on this topic, including the impact on the 10-year plan. We haven't received any answers from her office, and I know she's new. She's had difficulty with other. There have been other things getting in the way of her being able to respond to us. But we are now at the point of decision where we really truly need the information we've asked of her. And in addition, we had sent out questions yesterday at the very late hour, asking specifics on the borrowing plan and process. So to take this particular spreadsheet, which was generated a few weeks ago, and try and interpolate what the impact is for the town, I think is not a wise move.
Yeah. I hear you. I understand you. I just want to see what these numbers are. I think everyone else should see them. You're not wrong. This is a tiny piece of the total picture, but let's just see what it is. And so this is a $23.3 million number, which means that this has to be done in the past 48 hours. Is that correct?
Correct. And
Okay.
I also do have that general spreadsheet, Brian, that she provided a while back based on different tiers of debt.
Yeah, which we were not working with a $23.3 million net number at that point. So this is fresh, and all this shows is the total debt service to the town in each of those years. That's all this shows. And so this foots with what I articulated earlier, which was the number was probably somewhere around 1.7 million aggregate, and it's probably somewhere around 460 per household, roughly speaking. And I'd gotten there just doing back of the envelope math, but it's directionally informative. It's not the basis for making a decision. It's just so that people understand roughly what we're going to hear from Jen. Okay, that's helpful. Michelle, if you could just forward this to everybody on capital budget, that would be really helpful. The other question I have is sorry, Corey, you had your hand up. It's down now. Did we? Are we set, or did you have a question?
No, that was just trying to provide data that I had, but Michelle's got better data, so thank you very much.
Okay, great. Okay, I mean, the other issue is I think it's important, very important to see the town manager's motions on these. I mean, that is fundamentally what's going to be voted on at town meeting, not what's in the warrant, which doesn't have a number. And so I feel very strongly we need to see those before we vote this. Michael, I'm just looking at the list of questions that you sent out last night. So the specific amount for the town hall, it was actually yesterday afternoon, pardon me, the specific amount for the town hall building request was number 1. Number 2 was the warrant article numbers. Number 3 was the breakdown of the funding mechanism. Number 4 is the possible capital request for special town meeting in the fall of 2023 and spring of 24. And then number 5 was the 2023 fall STM one-time costs and capital requests. Okay, and then I had followed that up with an email requesting the town manager's motions for each of the relevant warrant articles, as well as the capital requests article.
Brian, there's one other item that's important, and that is Jen had proposed, just floated trial balloons on new borrowing mechanisms.
Yes.
Or special purpose stabilization funds. It's only in the idea stage, but it would have a significant impact on the taxpayers' tax load, from what I understand. And I feel very uncomfortable talking about it from a layperson's point of view. But from what I could see, and I don't know if Corey's still on the line. Yeah, there you are, Corey. Maybe you could shed some light, but it sounded to me like if these special purpose stabilization funds were funded through, I believe, overrides rather than debt exclusion, either way, it's a major tax increase per household. So I think that's also part of our equation in trying to understand what can the town afford for this project.
So let me just poll the capital budget committee for a second on this topic. I'm not asking for a vote, but I want to know people's feelings. How do I phrase this in a way that it's not leading? How do people feel about whether we should or should not, or even have, well, how do people feel about what it is that we owe the taxpayers in terms of disclosure of the other items that they're likely to be asked to fund through tax increases over the next, well, in the immediately foreseeable future? Let's put it that way. Why don't we start with you, Mike? And
Ask your question again, please.
sorry, the question is, what do you believe we as a committee owe the taxpayer in terms of an explanation of what other requests they're gonna, for what other requests for tax increases they're going to face in the immediately foreseeable future?
Long pause. I feel that we do owe the town our view to the town's current and future fiscal needs. And that if our committee is aware of likely tax increases and we can prove them, how we might prove them would be to articulate the different, and I'm jumping way ahead, and I don't feel that's fair, really. But if we jump to special purpose stabilization funds and what those tax increases would entail, I think it's part of our responsibility in looking out for our fiscal future to provide that information. Does that make sense? Did I just convey something clearly? I was just
Probably as clearly as I conveyed the question, which wasn't 100% clear, but
right.
I think I got the gist. Susan, thoughts? What is it that you feel we owe the taxpayers in terms of sort of a full picture?
Well, we brushed on this a little bit in the meeting where Jean Dippold joined our conversation. I don't really feel like it's the sole responsibility of the capital budget committee. I feel like it's the responsibility of the town to inform its residents. And I say that because we don't want to look like we're the one party out there that's, trying to undermine things, from happening. But the other thing is, we don't always have the information. Like, we're sitting here right now getting a spreadsheet tonight that explains how this is going to be funded. So I think it's the responsibility of the town. I articulated that in the prior meeting, maybe it was 2 meetings ago, that I felt that was an important message that we need as a town to communicate to our residents.
Okay, so it's an uppercase we. All the committees, everybody. Okay.
Everybody, yes.
Ralph, thoughts? What do you feel we owe the taxpayers in terms of complete picture before asking them to vote on this?
I tend to agree with Susan. I think it really is the obligation of the select board to do this. And they should be fully forthcoming as to exactly what they expect to be funded over the next 5 years, maybe 10 years. And we're just in the position of trying to actually figure out how to pay for it as best we can within the 10-year capital plan. But it's not our obligation, in my view, to actually try to figure out for the town how much it's going to cost the taxpayer going forward. But it is the obligation of the select board to tell everyone exactly what is likely to happen over the next 5 to 10 years. I think not to do so would be a dereliction of duty, to be perfectly honest with you. So.
Okay, Carolyn, I see your hands up. I'm going to come to you in a second, but I'm just going to finish as the fourth member of the committee that's on the call. I concur with the other three members who have spoken. I feel ultimately it is the taxpayer that is going to need to make a decision on this particular project. But for them to ask them to do that, I believe that they deserve the benefit of full disclosure in terms of everything else we're going to ask them to fund. Otherwise, they're going to be extraordinarily angry when we come back in the fall or next spring or whenever it is and ask for another tax increase, which will happen. That was not disclosed at the time that they were asked to fund this. So I think we owe the taxpayer that. That's my personal feeling. But I'll go to you, Carolyn. You've got your hand up.
I just wanted, I don't disagree, but at the same time, I also just want to ask the question, like, if we don't do this project, what would you see happening with the town hall? How are we, something needs to happen with this building. And so we have a project that we've invested money to make plans for. We're not happy with the price, but we have the plan. It meets the needs. It fixes all the things that are wrong with the building, all the systems that are at the end of their useful lives. What happens if this doesn't pass? How is that going to be wrapped into the capital plan? It's not going to go down.
No, totally understood. So look, that's a fair question, but before I even try to address it, does that, in your opinion or in anyone's opinion on this call, obviate the duty that I think at least many of us feel to provide full disclosure on what's coming?
Since I don't disagree with that at all.
Okay.
I just
I
think
just
it
want to make
needs
sure
to be
because
made clear that this is not a nice to have.
Okay.
That these are all needs that the town has. They can be met in different ways for sure, but this is not a nice to have. Something needs to happen and there needs to be a plan. And if we kick the can down the road again, I can't imagine it's going to come back with a smaller price tag.
So you're asking a question to an individual where, typically the question would be generally addressed by a group of people over an extended period of time, do some real thought, but I'll wing it. Okay. And this is just, one person's, knee-jerk view. I want to be careful here because I don't want to taint your project. I think that if this is really the price for projects of this nature, you're going to see a lot more small towns just decide they're not going to do them. That's my honest instinct. I think that the public sector structure for bidding these projects is such that it's about to price a lot of towns out of the market completely. And and that's ultimately going to lead to structural change. Starting with old historical buildings that will be preserved as opposed to renovated, because the numbers just don't work.
You can consider it a rhetorical question, but I did want to just
look,
put it out there as something that needs to be thought about, because
it's not my nature to punt. It's not my nature to punt, and I'll stop if you want me to stop. But you asked the question. I think that we would have to think long and hard about how structurally we rethink this project to avoid the problems that are presenting themselves in the price tag. If completely renovating an old building is something that people who build new buildings or like to build new buildings don't want to do, and hence they're pricing it to reflect their disdain, then we should recognize that and think about that in terms of how we structure the project. And we've got two other absolutely spectacular buildings within a stone's throw of this building that that have been preserved impeccably for very short money, as opposed to attempting to completely renovate them and bring them up to 2022 building code, and all of the the layer upon layer of public sector pricing that comes with that. I just think you're going to see a lot less of these projects happen in the future. This is really where the market thinks the pricing is going to settle out. That's just one person's view. And most town halls are going to be very new, very compact, very efficient, and standalone space going forward, as opposed to attached to something historical.
Brian,
Mark,
we
has-
have Corey and Mark have their hands raised, and after they go, I'd like to offer some observations too.
Sure.
But we should recognize Mark and Corey.
I agree, and I apologize. I mean, it was perhaps a rhetorical question, but I never wanted to sort of shy. So, and I want to get back to, before I go on to Mark and Corey, I do want to say this is a beautiful building we've built, and I understand that this is how the market's priced it. I want to keep coming back to that. This is the first time I've seen a design that I think my grandkids would be proud of. Hopefully they're around 100 years from now. So we're going to get, sorry, Corey or Mark first?
Mark's had his hand up for a while.
Okay, Mark.
So, just in terms of, sharing the information with the people of the town of the projects coming down the road, it's worthy of people knowing about them, but the next question is, well, how much are they going to cost, right? And that's the question that everybody wants to know the answer to, and that's the question that we as a committee have been challenged with figuring out for our own project along the way. And you can see how complex and volatile it can be. So it's without having the full answer, we can tell them what the subjects are, but I don't know that we can accurately reflect in numbers what that translates to. So again, I'd be cautious in going down that road, because it's as long as it stays in the theoretical level in the subjects, but it's not to be able to share specific numbers for buildings that haven't even been designed or programmed is not really practical, or even, is accurate to the point where it's going to help us to that point. But, in terms of, that idea here, we were tasked by the select board to come up with, charged with a certain mission here, which we carried out, right? We did what we were asked to do. We met all of the objectives except for the net neutral funding charge. But, we're operating in our lane here. We're not looking at the school building, the school facilities committee. They're not looking at us. So maybe there's sort of a capital plan that needs to be developed to address all these so that they don't all collide together. Because regardless, the town's going to have needs along the way. And if you don't complement them, if you don't plan them out together holistically, you're going to end up in these situations where nothing gets done. And right now we've got nothing that's getting done.
So before we move on to Corey, thank you, Mark. Let me share what I can. And in terms of the coming needs, there's actually sort of a range, starting with things that are virtually 100% certain in terms of when and how much, to things that do become truly theoretical. So you're right. We shouldn't be, creating ghosts of theoretical things. But we know with 100% certainty, we should be spending $1 million on roads every year. And we're basically in the final year of burning through reserve funds from prior years in meeting our needs. Next year, we will have to fund $1 million worth of roads. And about 200 grand of that's going to come from the state. The other 800 grand is going to come from us, one way or another, either out of the operating budget, which is highly unlikely, or in the form of a request for incremental taxes. And that, that will be effectively the roll off. The other thing is that that we know with 100% certainty is that across all of our buildings, we should be spending a 7-digit number every year in terms of stuff. Some of it should be chunky, some of it not, but what's really stark about the capital budget or the capital requests article that you're going to see in the warrant is there's literally nothing in there for any of our buildings, like nothing. And that's why we end up with buildings like this town hall. So there has to be a shift to annual maintenance, because that is the least expensive way to provide quality space in perpetuity, which is fundamentally the job at hand. It's not, it's not to replace buildings every 25 or 50 years. They're not disposable. And so that's, can I put a number on that? What I can tell you is, we could easily spend $1 million a year without even blinking, and the number's probably much higher than that. And then we get into stuff that's more theoretical. I mean, people may or may not support the fields and courts, right? And yes, there's an acknowledged need to do something with regards to first responders, but there's not a project. But certainly that's an 8-digit number, right? So this stuff is all coming, and it's all part of the dialogue in the immediate future. And I think we have to balance, and we have to balance the reality of the disclosure with attempting not to have that sort of play against this project. It has to be the context for this project, is what I would say. And so I think comments and disclosure are going to be really need carefully crafted in order to have that sort of delicate finesse to it. That's Mark, that's the best I can share. There's a range from absolutely near and real to longer term and more theoretical in terms of that stuff. Corey?
Yeah, my apologies. My phone wasn't responding to the mute button. And thank you for letting me speak on your call. As you know, I'm not part of the committee. Corey,
Always, Corey, you're welcome.
Yeah, and I'm going to, what I'm going to say is going to be, I'm trying not to opinionate about the project or anything like that. So I will share just kind of facts as I know them. Brian, to your earlier point, one thing that was shared with us last night's meeting was a comparable project in Norton, which basically cost, in the realm of $900 square foot, kind of all in. And so your point about, whether or not small towns can even do this, really, I think the umbrella is even wider than historical renovation. It's, can they build anything? If a police station is going to come in at again, over $1,000 a square foot, can any town do it? And I think this extends way beyond just historical stuff. One other thing that I've been talking about, I do have a lot of conversations with residents and that are concerned with the numbers, especially when it comes to large things that are coming. Let's say a school, for instance, is that, not moving forward on certain projects doesn't give us or the town carte blanche on spending that money somewhere else. So, I mean, if we don't spend $25 million here, it's not like we get to spend an extra $25 million on a great gymnasium for the new school. And that's why and I'm a big believer in the needs conversation, because we have to tackle everyone, and the people will have to be convinced that every dollar spent is a need, and not that, well, we had this extra money lying around, so we bought that. And just from the capital budget perspective, and this is kind of just for some guidance on that question, because Brian, I think your question about, the taxpayers are looking for information and how to think about this. And the politically elected boards, and like myself, we have a policy slant to us. I mean, that's what we're elected to do. And boards like Capital Budget Advisory, being non-elected boards, play a really important role in giving that objective thought about the impact to our credit rating, the impact of going forward, how this would affect what we can do in 5 years. All those things are really important, and things that you guys can speak to in a way that is potentially more effective than those of us that have been elected can. So I would encourage you to embrace that perspective, and in whatever form that is. I'm not saying you should do anything, but use that position to help guide the town in having the right conversation.
Okay, so Corey, I think what I just heard you say, correct me if I'm wrong, is in the event that the select board does not provide the complete picture, we should be prepared to do so. Is that fair?
I like that turn of phrase, but I would it phrases that if the select board cannot, and again, this is
if for whatever reason,
I'm just a little hesitant to address the communications failures for a variety of reasons. But I do agree that a lot of these things should have been brought to you much earlier. I'll leave it at that. I think you need to decide with what you're comfortable with. If the lack of data and what you have right now is sufficient enough to cause the capital budget committee to decide something on the project, you can only make decisions with what the information you have in front of you. And so I wouldn't endorse making a decision without information that you need, but I also wouldn't say that, if there's something that would not impact your decision, then I wouldn't wait to hold out on making sharing that viewpoint. That's how I'm dodging that question, Brian.
Fair enough. Okay.
Brian, we also have a question. Mark Cameron has his hand raised, and Jean Haley Dippold has her hand raised.
Okay, let's do Mark and then.
Sorry, that mine's an error. Sorry.
Okay, so let's move on to Jean.
Hey everyone, are you able to hear me?
We can.
Okay. So I take your point and agree that the select board should be disclosing the information, including that which we have previously voted on with respect to our intent in the fall to address certain issues. Just for your information, I do believe that based on those votes that we took a few weeks ago, that we will be dealing with and addressing the question of special purpose stabilization funds. These funds right now, based on what we know, and we are still researching them, both in terms of the legal mechanism as well as the amount to fund, would essentially be as follows, just for your information. $1 million, if we were to fund a fund with $1 million each year, that would be an increase of $266 for the median household, i.e. someone who has a 995 assessment. And that's a number that will continue to hit each year that the select board decides to continue to fund at $1 million. Now, the way the mechanism works, it's a little unique. It's not a permanent capital override. It is a mechanism where the select board can move the number down in the future if it so chooses. It's meant to essentially try to catch up a town that has severe or significant deferred maintenance, which is the category I would put Cohasset into. And so, for example, we could try to catch up roads and sidewalks and get it more normalized. And then after however long we think we need that fund for, essentially move the fund down or move it to zero even. And so that is the way that that fund works. But right now we are still trying to figure out for roads and sidewalks, as well as for the schools, what the appropriate number would be. We have roads and sidewalk committee, just for everyone's edification. We've gotten we've bought 2 reports from engineers that have, from what I recall, estimated 13 million for roads, 9 million for sidewalks, to essentially try to rehabilitate our roads and sidewalks and get them into a place that I think people want them to be. And then on the schools are a bigger question, obviously, because we're right now in the MSBA process, which is a big question mark. But what we do know is even if we don't do anything with the MSBA process or any sort of major capital renovation or new building, we have a list of $50 million of repairs from the AI3 condition study that we got. And again, the question is, how much should we fund to try to responsibly stay on track with repairs and maintenance for the schools? And what does that timeline look like? So again, the math works out for no matter how much we fund in either of these funds is going to be for every million, it's an increase of $266 a year for the average, or I should say the median taxpayer. So that's just some of the math and how it works. And the select board has voted to consider both of these funds for the fall town meeting and use that interim time to try to address these questions.
Okay, we have exactly, thank you, Jean, that's helpful. Mike, you're waving your hand.
Yeah, I had some observations that I wanted to make.
Okay, please, and keep
but
in
are you
mind,
giving me,
well, I just want to say it's 6:53, we've got 7 minutes, so please let's make the observations and then do whatever we can in terms of messages to both select board and advisory with regards to where we are, whatever that is. But
okay. So 3 points. One is what you just referred to is feeling pushed to come up with a response, a recommendation when we don't have all the information that we want. I feel that I will make this suggestion again, and I've made it to some of those folks on this call. I would suggest that this article, this warrant article, be postponed to a special town meeting sometime in the next 4 to 6 weeks to allow capital budget, and if advisory so chooses, advisory to spend a lot of time to explore the financing and to weigh whether or not this is a project that's too expensive overall. I want to address the question that was raised about a plan B. What do we do? My feeling is that the charge is deficient, that the charge needs to be amended to include a plan B. And it's not fair to ask this committee right now, the Town Hall Building Committee, to suddenly, or capital budget for that matter, to suddenly pivot and say, okay, here's our plan B. A plan B would take a long time to pull together, but there should be. If it doesn't prevail, we need to have a plan for what we do. And to Carolyn's point, and I also want to add to the list for Jennifer is what is the impact for our credit rating at the different levels of debt service? And I've asked this question before, what is our forecast growth? All of those are factors that need to go into this equation. So if I were asked at this point, I would probably vote not to recommend because we have insufficient information. And I don't think that's fair to the Town Hall Building Committee for all the work that they put in to get a not recommended vote because we didn't have enough time to go through this. And just to the comment that was made before, that there was a lot of input or a lot of conversation with capital budget, not that I recall. And perhaps you had it with Sam Wakeman, may he rest in peace, but no one has replaced Sam, and nor has anyone reached out to us to engage us to try and front run some of these objections that you're hearing now for the first time. So in fairness, I feel, and I'll just go back to my recommendation or suggestion, is that you withdraw the warrant article and call for a special town meeting and election within your constraint of this 30 to 60 day bid window and energy rules changes. But give us the time that we need to really work through all of these concerns so we can come up with a solution that we can recommend to the town. Now, that's my personal opinion. I'll just leave it there.
So, Brian, we do have a comment. And it's from Jean Healy Dippold, and she's just addressing Mike and saying that we considered postponing town meeting to late May, early June, but cannot do that under the state law in light of ballot deadlines.
Thank you.
I think Mark has his hand up again.
Yeah, I
And-
see that. Let's go with Mark, and then we're gonna.
And keep in mind, we did ask and we did request the select board at a previous meeting a couple of weeks ago to postpone this. That was our town hall building's recommendation. And upon our recommendation, the select board voted against that. So leaving us in this position here. Also, with that said, is this requires it requires a town meeting vote as well as a ballot election vote, and having notification to the Attorney General's office, we're very limited in what we can do here. Again, making this process very difficult. So we're open to ideas and ways to structure it, but again, any time that's going to lapse, the bids are going to expire. We're going to have to pay Commodore to go procure another set of bids that are going to be valid to then go to bring that to town meeting, unless we go with a higher number that includes a calculated escalation. And we want to all, as the town, take that risk because we can't stop time. It's always going to keep going. So we can come up with a number today, but if we don't vote for another couple of months, there's nothing to say that that number is going to have held true.
Okay. So we're out of time in about 1 minute. So let me just very quickly ask the voting members of the committee whether they want to vote this or whether you want the weekend, or 2 more days plus the weekend, and vote this on Monday. Susan, I'll start with you.
I'm more inclined to wait till Monday to sort of distill all the stuff we learned today.
Okay. Mike?
I feel we need Jen Mullen before we can make a recommendation, one way or the other.
Okay.
I don't see how we could schedule, I mean, today is Wednesday.
Today's Wednesday.
Thursday.
First thing we can schedule,
Would be like a Monday,
Yeah.
5 p.m. before town meeting, but who knows where that meeting would go? You know, it's.
My guess is nowhere different, but at least it leaves the window open for evolution of thought.
But I'm willing.
It's up to you. And we can also
encourage
vote this
people.
now and re-vote it Monday if people feel that way. It's a messier way to handle it, and it sends, perhaps a message prematurely, but thoughts, preferences? Silence. Okay. So both of you believe we should vote this Monday. All right. Does anyone else on this call believe we should vote this moment, having participated in the call?
At this point, I would say no, because.
No,
right
I'm
now
asking anyone from town hall building or from select board, just recognizing where we are. Does anyone else feel that we should vote this moment anyway?
Right.
Well, I guess what we're really saying is, and town hall admitted this themselves, that we don't love the number. It doesn't look like we're ever going to love the number. And really all we're doing by voting it is putting it in front of the townspeople to make a decision on. I just, again, don't feel that they have all the information they need to make a great decision. That's my big concern. But
Just to be clear, it's going, and unless someone other than us pulls the warrant article, it's going in front of the townspeople. We're not voting on whether or not they're going to have the opportunity to vote.
Yep.
We're voting a recommendation in favor or against.
Yep.
Okay. Sounds like now's not the right time to do this, or at least not the optimal time to do this, given where people are at this moment. So we're at 7:02. We're now, sorry.
well, Brian, you haven't expressed your stance on it or your opinion.
I am schizophrenic on this and pretty much every aspect of this project at this point. My brain is short circuited. But I, on one hand, I agree with you, Susan, that I love the design. I hate the price, and I'm not sure that's going to change between now and Monday. On the other hand, I also agree with you, Mike, that we should do everything we can to to gather whatever data might allow us to at least give the window of opportunity for evolution of thought on this. So that's where I am.
Ralph?
Well, the problem for me is that I do think the price is so different than what the expectation was, when in fact the committee was charged, that in fact it is almost impossible for me to say that we should really do this, particularly where I know what's coming down the pike for other projects, without in fact telling everyone what the impact is if we actually pay for this project and also pay for the ones that are inevitably going to occur. And it's not just 260 or 266, it's 266 times 3 or 4 times when you get through with it all. So you're talking about increasing people's taxes by 10 or 12%. It's really, if you don't tell people that, then in fact you can't do this one until you actually have told people the rest. And at that point, people can make a decision themselves. So, but the current price is way, way too high for what the value is we're getting out of it. That's all.
Thanks, Ralph. And just to be clear, I overlook Ralph because he technically won't vote on this, but the opinion is always incredibly valuable.
Well, the question then is Francine Lyons, if she joins us on Monday, and I expect she would for town meeting, without having heard this conversation, would she recuse herself?
Well, this is being recorded. Maybe possibly we could get her access to the recording. I don't know, Michelle, if that's possible. But she might have the benefit of being able to at least listen to it.
We can certainly get Francine the recording.
Okay, so that's
right, but she would not have a chance to ask questions. She would certainly have a chance to engage in give and take with the rest of the committee on Monday.
Yes, and certainly present any questions to Chris, Jen, anyone else, or the building committee.
We've asked Chris Senior and Jen Mullen numerous times with multiple questions and have not received a response.
Understood.
Just saying.
So sorry, I do need to interject. It's 7:05. We're now 5 minutes into the advisory committee's meeting time, and we're being extraordinarily disrespectful to another committee. I think we've gone as far as we can for tonight. And unless this is something we need to discuss right now, this moment, I think we should let the town hall building committee go. We can stay on and continue to discuss this if necessary.
I agree.
Corey just posted, there's a hearing tomorrow on this by the THBC.
Okay.
Well, thank you for that, Brian. We do need to get to our other meeting. Thanks for all the thoughtful comments tonight. It's been said over and over again, we love the design, we hate the price. We still feel that it's important enough to push this project forward. It's going to be up to the citizens to vote on this. Yep. We don't start doing projects in the town. My fear is the next project comes down the line that's significant. The citizens will look at it and say, hey, you didn't do the town hall project. Why should we do the school project or whatever the next significant project is? Why should we go that way? And it gets to be a challenge too, to get committees together. Why do they want to sit on a committee for 3 years or more, and then find out that it's a waste of time? That's happened 3 times in this case. And then there's a bidder's remorse that goes with this too. If you get to the point where this goes out for pricing, the bidders will look at this town as Cohasset and say, well, gee, town halls had a few times and nothing has come to fruition. Why should we put a number out there when we know we can go to another project that's maybe privately funded, there would be more of a short case. So there are implications is my point, only point on that. But we do need to scoot. And
You do.
thank you very much for your time and thoughtful.
Thank you
comment.
for your patience
Thank you.
with our deliberation. And thank you for the
And
great
also-
work that you've done on this project. It is a great design.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Good night.
Good night.
Phil,
Yes.
do you, oh, it's too late.
I'm
Adjourn your
here.
meeting, but that's okay.
Phil,
Michelle,
How are you?
were you talking to me, Michelle?
I was.
What happened?
I was just saying you should adjourn your meeting. You had a joint meeting, but that's okay.
Okay.
Okay,
I'll start over there.
thank you. Okay, bye.
Bye now.
Mark, you can adjourn the meeting. Not anymore. Okay. All right, which leaves capital budget. Michael, you said you had a hard stop coming up. Is that correct?
I'm fine.
Okay, and I'm sure people are exhausted at this point anyway. I just don't want to
Yeah.
until we actually come up with a plan for the next 5 days, which is
I
literally.
agree. We need a plan for the next 5 days.
So we need to have a conversation with Chris and Jen. And we need to provide very clear guidance as to exactly what we want from them. So do we want to create a list right now? Do people want to send me their requests and I can compile them? And send over, a single streamlined list? What would people like to do?
Let me say something about this whole process and how it got off track so far. And that is, there is no plan B. To reflect on what Mike has said, there is no plan B.
That's correct.
And the assumption has always been that everything is wrong with the HVA system, with everything else, and that those assumptions need to be challenged. So in order to actually come up with anything that will address the question of, are we going to abandon these buildings and just let them go to their ultimate deterioration, or is there some other way to look at this whole thing, which does not start with the assumption that things are so bad, that the structures are so awful, that the all of the mechanical systems are so bad? And those are the assumptions. Those assumptions need challenge. They are not necessarily correct. And that's where we are. A plan B we've talked about this for 6 solid years, that no serious plan B has been addressed. And quite frankly, I know that some people have looked at the boilers. They're 2 Buderus boilers. They've looked at the electrical panel. These are not in disrepair. They're not in trouble. They're not old and outdated. None of that's true. So the question really is, why isn't there some time available to actually say, what is plan B? Because this one looks so outsized in terms of price and is so outlandish with regard to what is originally was assumed would be true, that we do better than we did 3 years ago instead of much worse. I mean,
Yes.
the whole set of assumptions here is wrong. So I don't know. I look at it and I say, much as I said before, you need a very different way to look at these problems, and the way to actually hand them off to a consultant is the wrong way. It just is. Anyway, it's my view. And you need time now. There's no time. You've got 5 days. Right? What are we going to do in 5 days to challenge the fundamental assumptions under which this whole project is created? I don't know. You can't do anything.
Ralph,
I think
my feeling is that Plan B was taken off, the potentiality for Plan B was taken off the table when the select board came up with their, list of what they had to meet as a committee. Because Plan B for me, and I think a lot of people in this town, has always been renovate the old building and put town hall in it. But they took that off the table.
You're right. You're right. Yeah.
And that's why
Yeah.
I think that's a big reason why we are where we are.
I agree with you. And yet we can do nothing
Again,
about that now.
it's too bad because the poor town hall committee, they just went up, with the charge that they had and they did their job, as they said. And, it's just unfortunate they invested so much time and effort into it. It would have been great to have Plan B. But, just one more comment on the side, the comment that we can't really project what we think things might cost. We sure can, because there are towns all around us who have done buildings,
Right.
in the last year, or have buildings that they've approved to do, and we can use them as, representative costs of what we would.
And no one has undertaken that project to look at other towns and see what learnings we can get from that. I mean, this is all, are you through, or what else do you have? Okay. I feel that with a price tag this high, that the assumptions that were made in 2018 need to be removed. And I start with the location of the municipal facility, town hall. That should no longer be a requirement, especially if there are other options, whether it's the facility on 3A or whether it's the Oaks. I think we ought to be looking outside the box, and we ought to really, I don't know if anyone has really looked hard at what Chris Senior has come up with in terms of how much space the municipal operation truly needs. And I've heard this from others around town too, that sort of quote of people from around town. But I think the feeling, and I share it, is that with the move to virtual services, there's no reason why we can't continue some operations that are virtual. Some must be housed in a town hall, but some may not. But I agree with you, Ralph, that there needs to be more challenge, and I'm really unhappy with how late in the game this has come before us. That we would normally have started in on this several weeks ago and probably had Town Hall Building Committee back multiple times. We would have had Jen Mullen and Chris Senior with us multiple times, because this price tag is so high. So as far as a plan, I will offer a suggestion, and that would be if we meet from 5 to 7. Whether we need full 2 hours, I don't know, but we seem to be pretty comfortable with a 5 o'clock start. And see I don't know what else we should be looking at, but I have that list of things that I would love to have in hand for the weekend. And that would be coming from Jen Mullen, if not Chris Senior.
Okay.
And they've got 2 days, or a day and a half, if the town hall closes at, I don't know, 12:30, 1 o'clock on Friday.
Yep.
To pull these answers for us. We're asking for them. We're not fooling.
Okay, so so people saw my email, which was your email, Michael, plus 2 more requests. What I just ask each of you to do is send to me anything else that you want. I mean, I think we actually need, the debt service numbers, but anything else you think that we need?
Impact to credit rating at these different levels.
Yep.
With these different overrides and debt exclusions. How much do we borrow before our credit score goes down? Basically, what's our upper limit? All well and good to say, well, special purpose stabilization fund for $4 million across 3 projects is $1,000 more in taxes. What does that do to our credit rating?
So I can answer some of this. A tax doesn't really do much of anything to our credit rating.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And if they fail?
A debt offering, and if they fail, it does nothing to our credit rating, really.
Or would the town
But when you
Well,
take on
okay.
debt, look, when you take on debt, that's a different animal.
So if an override doesn't pass and the town decides, well, we're going to pay for it out of operating budget. I don't know. We haven't had a chance to really wrap our heads around all of these different future borrowings and what would happen if they failed.
Yeah.
And the town decided to just, I don't know.
No, you know what? It's interesting, Michael. You know, your point is exactly why we motivated to create the long-term financial planning committee at this time,
which went nowhere.
You know, first Dawn was gone, and then Jen was. You know, we onboarded Jen. She got COVID. You know, people spent months. You know, basically like playing with the, you know, the structure and the mandate and basically, you know, it's just a bunch of administrative make work in the end. The one nice thing that, you know, came out of it is that at least we got a handful of people in the room from different silos to create an understanding that, you know, we all have, everybody has projects and they're all drawing from a common funding pool. That is the one thing that came out of this. And, you know, acknowledgement is the first step towards recovery, I guess.
Right.
So.
Okay.
That's where we are, but you know, this work has not been done. That was supposed to be the purview of the long-term planning committee, and hopefully it will be this coming year. Now that people actually realize that there's a serious need to do it without this town hall project.
So I'm just gonna throw something over the fence here, because I have a couple friends who just love to debate and argue, and one of them is particularly in my brain right now, and he would say, well, we know the number stinks, and we know we have a lot of projects, and we know everything's expensive, and we know we've put things off, and we haven't done our, you know, renovated our buildings, and we've kind of created this problem for ourselves. What would the number be that would make you think this was a good project to do?
It's a good question. It's a fair question.
It was, the assumption was that we could pay for it out of operating income. That's what the assumption was. That was even built into the original charge, and that was the assumption. And that came from the fact that the original or the last iteration of this town hall project was rejected by the voters, largely for the money, but also probably because it was going to be excluded debt, but also because they didn't like the design. But I'd say the excluded debt portion was the larger of the two reasons. So once that's realized, and I do think the charge included that. However, the charge asked for an impossibility, that is, a new building to be funded out of operating revenue.
Great.
That was simply impossible, as it turns out. That's what's happened here. So.
Right, and that has become even more difficult now that we've come to realize that there were things that we should have been maintaining, you know, for a long time, and those costs are all coming to bear. And are also putting a lot of stress on the operating budget.
That's correct. Right.
I don't know. I think of that, you know, personally too. But I do feel like, you know, it's too bad how this always happens, where we always have a gun to our head at the last minute on such a huge decision. This happened on the last time the town hall project came up. I don't know why that is.
So,
but there's a classic way that projects do get done well, and that it's usually you have a whole series of phases in a project, and in each phase you examine all of your assumptions again, and if you don't meet them, you stop. And you know, that was I have an awful lot of experience that just taught it. I know as simpler as business, so it was easier to do a project, but it was a very explicit phased process where at each phase it was reevaluated as to its profitability, its likelihood of actual success, And there was a way to deal with these things, but we don't deal with them. We're dealing with them at the very end of their life now, the end of the process, without having had any phase in between, which says, have we met the objectives? And so we have a
And that
problem this way.
Yeah.
and that phased approach was replaced by this owner's project manager approach.
Yes.
And no one presented the requirement to go or no go at a particular stage. And certainly no one, and I mentioned this earlier in the meeting, no one said, whoa, wait a minute, it's going way too high. We've got to stop and re-examine ourselves, which is what you're saying now. So that those guardrails were never put in place by any select board.
So Michael, do you have an answer to Susan's question? Like, what would it take for you to be on board on this?
I would
what
want to
number would
know.
you have been on board for this?
I would probably, this is my gut reaction right off the top of my head. I would probably go with Ralph's formula and add a few million to it. So that would probably bring it, I'm guessing, total wild guess. If we last left this project off in 2018 at 12.5 and it went to 16, then I would probably say 16.
Yeah. So, okay, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Is that?
I want to ask Susan and Ralph their number. Or is that a fair question? Is that just
No,
like,
totally fair
well, I don't know.
Well, I mean, we're just talking. We're not setting a constraint for them. We're just trying to understand each other's thinking here.
Right.
But Susan asked the question: what would it take? What would it take for you to be on board? I guess for me, I never really believed the 12.5 on the last project. So my starting point was always higher than 12.5 because they had deliberately held back a bunch of big items that were going to take for higher than 12.5. So
yes, like air conditioning, right?
Yeah, that number was always somewhere between 13 and
work.
right. That's the reality. And so when this project came in at 16, well, first it went to 15 and then it went to 16. I got my head around it at both steps of the way. And I actually did a lot of work and actually was listening in on their meetings and took them to task on a couple of things. And some really good design stuff fell out of that. I mean, they learned some things about their buildings that I accidentally just asked questions about. And so, I got my head around this at 16. And my recollection was that's where we were when we went to annual meeting last year and basically freed them to go ahead and pull money out of that we had set aside previously and put this out to bid. And then in August, I seem to recall it went to 24 and it went to 20. And then between August and January, it went to 24. And now here we are in May at 26. My brain short circuited on the jump from 16 to 20. I just, in my head, there was nothing that happened between March and August of last year that increased the price by 25%. And that's pretty much where I, kind of lost my grip on this train as it was leaving the state.
Right. And at that point,
yeah,
we could have said, stop. What can we do for 16?
Yeah.
Would it require renovating the old town hall, take away the stage and the hall space and put in offices?
Yeah, and it's interesting. Last August, when the $20 million number came in, the select board kind of considered this project dead. Like that number's a non-starter. And that was the cause that, that I don't remember if it was, Garrett or if it was Mark referred to. That was the pause. Like they were on pause for, for a couple of months, and then they picked back up. And I think basically somebody concluded, well, if we don't do this, then what are we going to do? So we have to proceed forward despite the $20 million number. And so they took the next step and it became a $24 million number.
Right.
At Corey's hand. And now, that was January, February. Now we're here with a real number in hand. Michelle, can you promote Corey?
I'm here if you can hear me.
Yes.
Yes.
So Brian, I think, the benefit of hindsight, I think, obviously if this process had began and we knew it was going to be a $25 million process, maybe we would have done things differently in the beginning. I'm not sure. It's really hard to kind of go back to a mindset. It's hard, right? And it's also hard to go through all the decisions that were made and say, well, could we have gone left or right? To your point, and just to kind of back up what you said about at the select board level, when the cost came up, this was before COVID, but there was also an understanding that, well, we've already spent, $2 million on trying to design the best building. At a certain point, the taxpayers deserve to see what their money bought them. And at 25 million, the town may not like it, and that just may be too much money. But we still did design something, and the design is very, very good. So we should present it. Otherwise, it's just going to be put back into a drawer somewhere, like all the other ones. So I think part of it was, there's some inertia here that we were at a point where we had to. I think the feeling was seeing it through to the end, because pulling the plug, without a meaningful alternative at that point, really wasn't an option. There's so much good work done. And that's not to say, I'm not trying to discredit the decisions that were made here. That's not at all my point, but there were reasons why, that red button wasn't hit at 16 because, that was kind of before COVID hit, right? So, and then the pause, and I think Mark's alluded to this, the pause in the year that went through caused this project to go up very, very quickly. Every time we delayed it 6 months, it seemed to balloon again. One of my colleagues pointed out that if we did delay it, and one of the reasons that they selected or they expressed why we should go now is if we delayed it 6 months, maybe it balloons again, or it balloons. So if this design is ready, then the cheapest it's going to be is right now. And that's pretty much a well understood fact. So if this design is ever going to be considered by the town, it should be considered now, not when it's more expensive later on. That's just kind of the logic, I think.
Right, but Corey, the price tag is so far beyond what this town should be spending that it can fall on its face. And that all of the goodwill, and we really should, and the Town Hall Building Committee has worked so hard, really doesn't mitigate the fact that it's far too expensive. And we have repeated each iteration of a Town Hall Building Committee has repeated the mistakes of the past. And I didn't say that in the meeting, but I feel that way, that we have the opportunity to try and pull this off within a certain price tag and say, we can afford this, but we can't afford that program. This is what we need minimum, the minimum viable project, not the best overall project that's costing $6 million. So that's my stance. That's my take on it. We blew it again and I hate to point to the select board, but I will, because the select board did not choose to exercise leadership on it.
And there's another aspect to that, which is, everyone always cites the doing the same thing over and over again. It's definition of insanity, but they usually only use it to define kind of their one perspective, right? But the other perspective is, if we had done this the first time, 10 years ago, we would have, paid down the building halfway and we wouldn't be looking at this now. If we'd done it 5 years ago, we would have had a building for $8 million left and would have been 5 years into the debt service, which would have opened us up, 5 years from now for other stuff. So I do think that there's opportunity costs at a lot of places here, right? And if we can go back and say, well, 5 years ago, if we said, well, if we redo this, it's going to be 25 million, but we could take this building now for 16, maybe a lot of us go, well, hold on a sec, so it's so hard to really understand where we are in real time. And it's also hard to understand looking backwards how things could have gone differently, because we're playing with a different set of facts. And it's important to reflect on, but it's also, I think the viewpoint can get us in different conclusions.
Right.
It's fair, Corey. Everyone. My sense on this is that we as a committee have a very different tone towards this project than the past one, in the sense that people are not. I'm not sure what the right word is. Upset about, really truly upset is probably the best way to say it. And towards either the project or the committee. I think actually I'm hearing a lot of very heartfelt compliments both towards the committee and their product. And this really is an issue of price. So I just I think we all in our hearts would love to come to yes on this. And absent the price, probably would. Okay. We are where we are. Is there anything else we want to cover tonight?
Just what is our plan for Monday?
We should post a meeting. Michelle, if you're still on, if you could post a meeting for 5 o'clock.
Where? On Zoom, and then we can.
Do you want to just meet at the school where a town meeting? Do you want to meet in person? So you're already at town meeting, or is that too difficult at 5?
Logistically, I can do it. I don't know how others feel. It might be easier than trying to Zoom and then get over there, but certainly we could do that too.
I'm just not sure what Monday's going to be like. I know for sure I can take the call from home. So maybe make it a hybrid. Well, no, that's awkward because you're in a gym.
The likely is that there won't be no need for a huge amount of discussion. You could make it 6 o'clock and make it in the gym. That's what I do.
Okay, that's fair, Ro.
Yeah, just allow people enough time to have a bite to eat and then get there at 6. And then, the meetings don't start till 7:15 anyway, based on the number of quorum. So, you've got an hour and a quarter.
Michelle, can you find us a room that we can go into rather than being out there on the floor? And
absolutely.
Can you get us the answers we've been asking Chris and Jen before the weekend?
I can. Jen returns tomorrow, so I'll be able to get some answers.
All right. Corey, do you have any other advice or guidance?
Sorry about that. I'm still here. I just walked away from my computer for a sec. No, I was just going to, my only thought was I will also work with Michelle to expedite any of this whatsoever. I do also, I was reflecting a little bit about what Brian said, which is, and I agree, I was not a fan of the previous designs. And this one, I think, as Brian said, is kind of universally recognized as a really good design. And whether it's worth the investment, that's hard. From the capital budget committee side, I fully understand the price tag. But I do take, and I think it's very important to the capital budget or it's to the town hall building committee that, they've done their job truly excellently. So that's my final reflections. I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Thank you for joining us.
Well, and thank
Yeah.
you for giving me your time. Seriously, this was very polite.
It's honestly interesting. I don't think that, my comments when I deliver the capital budget's view on this or votes on this are going to be any different, right? Other than maybe the vote itself, which is, great design, huge price, either yay or nay. We probably know which way that's going, but you as taxpayers need to decide whether or not you see the value here.
Right.
I mean, that's really what it's going to come down to.
And if I may, that one of the things when I was talking to the town hall building committee, I said, from their perspective, they should vote on their work. And I think that the taxpayers will kind of decide kind of either way. But if it is a good design, and I said, if you have done your work and you are proud of the design, let the people of this town decide what the impact of their wallet, whether it's worth it to them. But if the work is good, it deserves support. So, but that's from their perspective.
And understandably, we're not the design committee. We're looking at this from the other side, obviously.
Well, and that was my point about why you guys are so important. I mean, I'm a big believer in tension, right? Tension gets the best outcome, and nothing should be, kumbaya. And these should be difficult decisions.
Or not.
And that's a good
this
thing.
one is. Okay. Well, is there anything else that we want to cover this evening, or should we perhaps adjourn?
I'll move that we adjourn till 6 p.m. Monday, the 1st of May at Cohasset Middle High School at a room TBD.
All right. Do I have a second?
Good.
So Susan Franklin is the second. All in favor, roll call vote. Susan?
Susan Franklin, aye.
Mike?
Mike Dick, aye.
Brian Host, aye. And Ralph Dormitzer?
Dormitzer, aye.
All right. We are adjourned.
Thank you, everyone.
7:40.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Corey.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you.